Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. We lost Ozzy Osbourne today. Sad day, indeed. Big fan of his for many years, since I was probably 11 or 12 years old. Um, so, yeah, and just seeing him on the tribute concert a couple of weeks ago, which was really cool to see. Um, he didn't look great, and, so this isn't a surprise that this happened, but not this soon after that. So it's definitely a bummer. You know, and Ozzy, a lot of people, when they talk about the singers of Black Sabbath, you hear these people say, he wasn't the best singer of Black Sabbath, which is kind of just a ridiculous statement. And it's the same people who are, talk about Lars Ulrich not being a good drummer and that kind of thing, which is just, these is what these songs sound like, and that's all that matters, like the Metallica songs on those early records and whatever they're doing now, that's what it is. And those Black Sabbath first albums with Ozzy, regardless if Ronnie James Dio or Tony Martin or technically better singers, it doesn't matter. That like After Forever is not going to sound good with Ronnie Dio, the original one. War Pigs, the original version of that, isn't going to sound good with Tony Martin. That's just how it is. And so, yeah. With that said, Ozzy was the best singer of Black Sabbath because he, you know, was at the fucking beginning. All due respect to the other singers, including Ian Gillan. The first time I, kind of was aware of Black Sabbath as sort of a band was, I had been into Kiss and that stuff, and they had an evil look, but they weren't, all those songs were about, eating girls out and fucking driving fast or whatever, there was no actual, God of Thunder. I mean, ooh, great song, but I mean, it's no Lord of this world. I mean, come on. But yeah, so the first time I heard them, we used to go to my grandparents' house in Revere, and they had these neighbors that had teenage sons, and they will, had a. I think they had like a Mustang, and just they're always working on cars in the driveway, and they had a swimming pool. But they would always be outside blasting music, and one day they were blasting Iron Man, which I kind of knew, and then Sweet Leaf, which I didn't know. But when I heard that cough thing at the beginning, it was kind of scary. It is kind of weird sounding. And when you're 10 years old or whatever, it's yeah, it was weird. But that song immediately, I was like, wow, this is cool. And I didn't really, you know, pursue that or whatever. But my brother eventually got the "We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll" compilation by Black Sabbath, which is a good starter kit for that era of the band. And we would listen to that record. But "Tomorrow's Dream" became my favorite song by Sabbath, I think, around that time. But the when you open that record up, there's a picture of this woman lying in a coffin, and it scared the shit out of me the first time I saw it. And it still kind of creeps me out. I'll put it up on the thing here. See? Um, and then Ozzy became a solo artist after that, and I got into the first record, which was great, Blizzard of Oz, and it's got all the Crazy Train, I Don't Know, Suicide Solution, and then the back cover is always like, if we, this is Ozzy from Black Sabbath, and you think it's going to be evil, and then Randy Rhoads looks like he's going to sell you a Buick. The other two guys look like they're going to steal it a month later, and then you know nobody could have fixed his shirt before the. But anyway, amazing record, obviously. But I didn't really get hardcore into him until this one came out, which was significantly more evil. The upside down cross, and the dead version of him, and the weird language used inside this, which you know I was always fascinated with as like a D&D guy. By the way, that says the Ozzy Osbourne band. Just FYI. I remember figuring that out. Like we sat here with like, if you were good with those, what were those things that were in the paper? Those jumble things? No, we would just the something 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 as a Longfellow. Put it in the comments. Jumble maybe. So in April of 1982, April 2nd, Ozzy Osbourne was going to play the Boston Garden, and this would be the first concert that my brother and I would be allowed to go to without a parent with us. And UFO was opening, and Randy Rhoads had died recently, and the guitar player they had was a gentleman by the name of Bernie Tormet, and he had played with Ian Gillan. And I didn't know this at the time. And, for years after that, I thought I saw Brad Gillis because he played on the this record that came out shortly after that. But this guy was in the band for a couple of weeks until Brad Gillis came on board and helped out for the remainder of that tour. But this record, is really dark and has more of it doesn't sound like Black Sabbath whatsoever, but the feel of Diary of a Madman is definitely has more of a Sabbath feel than the first record, which I thought was a good an amazing record, just more of a hard rock thing. And the concert had that vibe as well. This is when Ozzy had Ronnie the dwarf that would come out on stage, and then they would hang him at the end of the show. And you should look up that guy's story. It's kind of a depressing story about the guy that was the dwarf that toured with them. But he was there. But the shows just had this real dark feel to them because when the lights went down, they would play that Diary of a Madman, that music that sounds like The Omen or whatever. And so that show was the first time where I felt like sort of I had found my tribe of burnouts and and those kind of people. Probably not the proudest moment of my life, like the bunch of dudes from Saugus, Mass, filing into the Boston Garden with no shirts on. And at the time, this is right after Ozzy had bit the head off a bat that someone had thrown up on stage in Iowa in January, a few months before. So there was a lot of controversy around the show, and the local news in Boston had a little segment on it that I'm going to try to find, and if I do find it, it will be right here.
The concert by Ozzy Osbourne was sold out long before the controversy broke about killing puppies as part of the act. 12,000 people spent an average of $10 a piece to hear a rock and roll band. That does put on a theatrical show, but these kids had not paid to be part of dead puppies or bat's head eating. And they weren't too happy about how their rock and roll hero had been treated.
I mean, the guy's wild, but he's not cruel. He's only out to entertain people. Hey, that's what people are here for. They're here to get entertained,
It's a bunch of baloney, It's not crazy.
Have you followed the group before?
Yeah, I've seen them before.
Never did anything like this. What are they like on stage?
Regular.
Ozzy snuck in a back door in an unmarked car. No interviews. Word is he just wants to play Boston and get out of town. We were not allowed in for pictures, but I did go in to listen to part of the concert. The crowd was typical, jumping to their feet as soon as the music started, cheering, clapping, generally having a good time. Through the first few numbers, at least, there was no trouble. The only thing resembling an animal was a rubber chicken that was tossed onto the stage. Ozzy completely ignored it. And according to the police monitoring the event, all went well.
We've had no problems, so to speak, of it up to the present time, and I'm very satisfied the way it's been going. But all these rumors that prove that they were false.
To put this event in perspective, earlier this week some rumors made their way into the media about dead puppies that got a lot of people upset, but which had no basis in fact. That's the controversy about the concert itself. But long after Ozzy Osbourne is gone, this city will remember this concert because it was over this concert that the two licensing powers in this city came to blows as to who is in charge of licensing an event like this. And now it will be several more months of court battles before that jurisdictional dispute is resolved. That, if anything, is the ongoing significance of what happened here tonight. From the Garden for News Center 5 Tonight, I'm David Ropeek.
And now we may be back from that segment, or if we're not, we're here back talking about this show. But I just remember when we were leaving the show, there was it was that backstage. This is the Boston Garden in 1982, so you can imagine how seedy it was. Cigarette smoke, urine, and a lot of mustaches, thin mustaches. A lot of guys named Dave, but I remember walking out, and in the Boston Garden, there was like a hall. When you would exit, you would get on these like long hallways. They were just stairs or ramps or something. But I remember some of them, they would have like a bare light bulb, and I remember some guy just like jumped up and smashed one, and then like the 350 people that happened to be filing through there were like, woo! And I was like, yeah, 12-year-old me. I'm like, yeah, fuck Ma. She doesn't know what we're doing at this show. She took us to that Styx show, and that was fine. Now we're here. Right? So then Bark of the Moon comes out in 1983, which I wasn't really that into. I like that song, but I never kind of followed him after that. And then, I discovered punk rock, and then, Metallica and Slayer happened. 1986, Ozzy puts out the Ultimate Sin record, which is another one I didn't really get into it. Same with Bark at the Moon. I liked some of the hits off it. But he toured with Metallica, who had just put out who had just put out Master of Puppets, their third record, their best record to some of us. And I had never seen Metallica at that point, and we went to that show. It was Cliff Burton, so I'm glad I did get to see him once. And they were amazing. And then Ozzy came out, and this is around that time when Ozzy was like the Liberace era, or where he looked like your aunt from Melrose, Mass, coming out on stage with all the stuff, but the frosted tips, that whole vibe. But we just weren't into it, and we ended up leaving. We saw like a couple songs, and in retrospect, whatever. I didn't really get back into him until probably 1991 when the No More Tears record came out. I had a band called Lugnut, and the guitar player, R.I.P. Alex Charay, who was significantly younger than me. I think he was like 16, and I was 21. And he was an amazing guitar player. This young kid was like one of these like virtuosos from Swampscott High School here in Massachusetts. And he could play like those guys, like Zakk Wylde and Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen. And but he was really into that No More Tears record, and we went and saw him on that tour. And yeah, and I like that record, but the real Ozzy for me was always just the output with Black Sabbath, and like I said earlier, the stuff. I love the Dio years, obviously, and I like I love Born Again, and I've been trying to do the later stuff. I bought this box set, the one that has the Tony Martin stuff on it, which I'm slowly getting into. It's not really hitting me yet, but I'm willing to give it a chance. But this also happened with some of these later Sabbath records. Obviously the classic first four records are the best Sabbath records, or the first six, and Never Say Die, and Technical Ecstasy gets some slack, but there's also a lot of people that love and respect those records, and Technical Ecstasy was one of those for me that took me many years, and maybe within like the last 3 years, I finally kind of got it, and I love that record. Now, and in that box set, right there, yeah. Wait, what? This white one, Technical Ecstasy. There's a by the way, if you don't have any of those if you're a Black Sabbath fan, or after Ozzy's death now you want to sort of explore more than just like the hits. Every one of these sets, well, not everyone, but they've all been good. They have a lot of cool stuff. If anything, just for like the books and the shit that comes with them. But Technical Ecstasy though Technical Ecstasy has some sort of alarm or truck. Technical Ecstasy has a different mix of the record on there, which is the one that when I heard it, I was like, oh, so that record really clicked with me after hearing that mix, and then I've subsequently listened to that way more than I used to, and I'm hoping at some point they'll do a Never Say Die one. But anyway, my point is Black Sabbath, one of the most important bands in my life, and a lot of people who would follow this podcast or watch these videos. For my social media today after this happened was filled with stuff like between the famous people posting, guys from Anthrax and Flea and whatever posting stuff. But every one of my friends down to the people that got into it through watching the Osbournes, which is fine. Like I'm kind of over that thing at this point where like the gatekeeping thing, which I would hope anyone with this much gray hair would not be a gatekeeper. But if some kid got into fucking Volume 4 by Black Sabbath because he saw the Osbournes when his mother was watching it, then where's the bad thing there? So don't gatekeep. Bad. And Ozzy wouldn't like it. So with that said, I don't have anything else to say here except Ozzy Osbourne, we're gonna miss you. Thanks for all the music. Thanks for all the just your existence. And yeah, R.I.P. buddy.